Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biotech Showcase, to another of our Insight sessions. I'm pleased to welcome you here. My name is Sarah Demme. I am the CEO and founder of Demme Colton, and Demme Colton, along with our partner EBD Group, are the founders of Biotech Showcase. We welcome you all here. I'm really pleased to introduce our next Insight session, Clinical Studies in 2021, the changing dynamics and challenges of getting studies done rapidly. Leading this discussion is Ben Bonifat, a founder and partner of Triangle Insights Group, along with the CEO of Axiom Metrics, Andrew Schachter, founder and CEO, not just CEO. With that said, Ben, I turn the virtual podium over to you, and I'll be taken off screen.
Terrific. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Andrew, this is a great opportunity to catch up a little bit, learn a little about your perspective on what's going on in clinical trials in the current environment and what might be occurring in the near term, hopefully when things get back to whatever we used to call normal. Can you give us a little background on Axiom and your priorities in leading the organization?
Sounds great. Ben, thanks for spending some time. Great to meet you and walk through the session together today. For a little bit of background, I founded Axiom literally 20 years ago this January. So speaking of major events, we're literally approaching one, and it's hard to believe it's been 20 years of driving technology and services in clinical research. For some background, we got started with the premise that technology can play a role in helping us run better clinical studies. There's fundamentally important information. It's buried in the study data. The question is, do you have access to it? Can you get at it quickly? Is the technology helping you be aware of risks, trends, issues that are inside that study data? And for us, that's been the driving force to creating a globally clinical platform that runs clinical studies. So when we got started, the idea many years ago, of course, was around just EDC data. And of course, we live in a world today where EDC data is just a part of it. Randomization, patient-reported outcomes are so many things that shape the clinical studies in the world that we live in today. So for a little bit of background, that's the origin of where we got started on technology. And then we wrapped services around it: data management, data analytics, biostats, pharmacovigilance, and so forth, to help people make these studies happen.
What have been some of the unique challenges this year in making that all happen?
It's very interesting you say that. We started working with a number of groups, Oxford University amongst them, on COVID-related research back in March. Challenges, obviously, for us were, we of course couldn't be in a position where we were going to see people and sitting down and mapping out the strategy, how to approach it, how to get it done right. So of course, we all had to do this, of course, remotely. Which, despite all the technology in the world, is still a challenge in clinical research. And the speed of startup to getting these COVID trials running, of course, has been the fastest we've ever been at the door of. So what would normally done in a couple of months, we're, of course, getting done in weeks. Team members are working through the night to get trials up and running incredibly fast. And we all know the global reason as to why that's so important.
Yeah, and I think everybody really appreciates that effort from your organization and others in making that happen. What are some of the biggest challenges in general on having studies run on time, timeliness, information along the way? What are those challenges?
The fundamental challenge this year, understandably, when it came to getting studies operational, is that the research world is not meant to be virtual. It's just the reality that we face. And in conversations with colleagues and friends in both small to medium biotech and life sciences companies, medical device companies where we spend our time and friends in much larger organizations, the virtualness of everything being done has been incredibly challenging. The reality of reacting to getting studies up and running when they don't have the ability to plan them accordingly, and be in a position where everything is being orchestrated in a completely digital environment, of course, has brought about the requirement to bring change. We know this has been a seminal event in history, and that has prompted, obviously, other things to take place where we're thinking out of the box as to how do we get things done. The thought that I would add to that, and maybe as a premise for some of our go forward conversation, is that the fundamentals to how trials have changed is more about the thinking at a biotech or a life sciences company. It isn't that the technology wasn't already available, it's how we're applying it because of the pandemic.
And do you think some of your partners, some of your clients are more receptive to adopting some of those technologies as a result of just really not having different options this year?
I absolutely agree with you, Ben. There is no doubt in my mind that what we've seen in medical device companies and biotech companies reacting to the pandemic has been to look at how can we drive activity out of the clinic for obvious reasons. We all know why. We can't get patients there with the same ease that we did before. There's obviously a time factor, there's a travel factor, of course, and ultimately there's a safety factor to these patients in so many different therapeutic areas. And there's been an explosion of thinking about how can we collect data from them remotely. When it comes to the patient, how do we look at gathering data in patient-reported outcomes? Do we put a diary in their hands so that they're in a position to report symptoms on a daily basis? Do we look at home healthcare options where someone can walk in with a tablet and do some of the activity that would otherwise be done at the clinic, but still ensuring that, of course, the principal investigator at that site is getting that data in real time so they can react to it accordingly? Being in a position where drug shipments which were previously, of course, going to a clinic and are now, of course, having challenges in doing so because of where the patient is, looking at direct-to-patient shipments so that we're now changing that paradigm as to how much easier it is to run that study. All of these tools were things that were available before, but the pandemic, as a colleague put it, so I am borrowing her wording without a doubt. Her comment was, if there are silver linings in things like this, we have to try and find them. And one of them is making studies easier to run in situations where they are challenging to make happen in a clinic in a normal scenario.
And I suspect a lot of the things that are going on remain confidential, but are there any specific stories you can share of kind of good problem solving within Axiom or elsewhere that you've heard about that really made a difference?
I can absolutely share some with you. We are running studies on a given day between 10 and 20 countries around the world. Right now, probably about 16. In oncology study that we were running in India, as an example, we had patients who needed drug supply. That drug supply would have come in an appropriate time frame. Obviously, global issues happening. We literally made arrangements for multiple patients for drug to be delivered 700 miles directly to a physician close to their home who could administer that drug safely for them. And we had to do that on many occasions in order to be able to keep patients in a study and, of course, on therapy, which is obviously the most critical thing for them. In Europe, we had medical device patients who were coming in for regular emergency supplies, batteries, equipment, and so forth, and had to make arrangements for all kinds of individual patients to get supplies. So our RTSM team was, amongst many others, working significant numbers of hours in order to deliver clinical supplies everywhere. And I will say it was a phenomenal effort to watch them make it happen, and a true team effort.
That's terrific. And anything you're doing internally to keep that kind of esprit de corps from, I suspect, team members who are all working remotely?
There's no doubt. Toronto is, as a facility, we have many people in the office and we have many people remote within our organization. I will tell you, very, very regular deliveries of chocolate to team members wherever they might be has been very helpful. Kidding and not kidding, because obviously chocolate's a pretty important source of fuel. It really has been planning from day one on how do we work together with the physical changes that were happening for our studies around the world. And of course, the impact of the pandemic to our organization directly. And that meant changing our dynamics in terms of team meetings, making sure people are getting supported, looking at team members and departments that needed additional resources to be able to make our way through this. So our HR team went in overdrive to be able to recruit team members wherever we needed them. So many organizations potentially downsized during the pandemic. We continued adding resources everywhere to support the influx of COVID studies.
And overall, for your customers or clients, do you think they're staying on time with the study timelines that they had at the beginning of 2020?
No.
Are they catching up? How's it playing out?
No, it's a great point. At the beginning of 2020, I made a remark to a colleague that it's going to be a lost year. And I think in many respects, we have a lot of studies running. Most of them are not running on time when it comes to enrollment. And all of our clients did tremendous planning at the start of the process. But there are just fundamental factors that stopped enrollment activity in a way that would make it very, very difficult to come back from in this year. And I think it's the reality of many studies. We virtualized everything that we could. So for example, e-consent wherever possible. So you're now obviously being able to consent the patient remotely. As we mentioned earlier, if they were doing a paper diary, can we turn that into a digital diary? But there are still constraints when it came to sites, as we all know, getting together from a contract perspective and moving along was significantly slower than anybody had planned. And I think that has an overall impact along the overall timeline. So no, I would say that 2020 will be a year that many clinical studies will not have met their enrollment goals.
So if that's kind of the understood challenge or a issue that can fully be understood, how about the other side of it? Have there been cost savings from adopting some of these tools that they might have been a little more slow to have gravitated towards?
No doubt. I agree with that assessment, Ben, as to potential cost savings, for sure. The fundamental idea of do we need to monitor 100%? Do we need to monitor 100% in person? These have obviously been conversations for quite some time. So when you think about things like remote monitoring, they play a role in obviously how we're spending money in a study. And to use remote monitoring as an example, we can do a lot of the same work, not all, of course. Quality of review of things that happen at the site, notwithstanding. We can change, though, a lot of the activity that gets done, still do a high quality job of reviewing data. And of course, now you're cutting down travel costs as part of that. And if you think about that across other areas, there is no doubt that you can cut down costs in studies by going virtual. It just comes down to ensuring the overall quality. And I think we all agree it's the most important thing. we do when we manage a study as a whole. Is the quality of the data, the safety of the patient, and ensuring that, of course, we're compliant with GCP and other guidances around the overall approach. But there are significant cost savings where that's concerned. And there's another aspect to all of that, which is the speed at which we're able to review data. So if we move towards more digital tools and more remote monitoring, more e-consent, more patient-reported outcomes on a digital basis, we're now in a position where we're seeing that data so much faster. And that's a fundamental benefit, pandemic or not, of doing anything on a digital basis where we improve compliance, access to data, analysis of the data, and of course, then the ability to hopefully speed up the research as a whole.
And can you just explain to me a little about the blinding issues there? Are you able to look at things as they're occurring, or do you still have to wait till specified dates for deblinding of some of those inputs?
Yeah, we take an approach where you just unblind a study whenever you feel like it. That's a blinding joke. That's a really bad blinding joke. But just so you know, our RTSM director is probably texting me as we speak for having made that comment. So I'll be in a lot of trouble where that's concerned. You're 100% right. Blinding directives are understandably critical to what you do in a study, and it's not going to change the fact that all of the information being digital is not going to give you a perspective as it relates to unblinded information. There's no doubt. But what it does give us, you take, for example, a paper-based diary. The fundamental issue with the diary is you don't know the level of compliance to the activity that's being done. And it's a challenge. They bring the diary into to the clinic. It's now 3 months old, and so forth. There is no doubt that the pandemic has caused people to open their eyes to increasing their compliance by doing a digital diary, even if they don't have an awareness as to how that patient's therapy is going as it relates to the study, if it's a blinded program. But another aspect just to think about when we think about running a digital study is if we use a diary and we link the diary in the case of treatment, we can now follow up directly with the patient to know, are they taking their therapy? Are they taking it at the right times? Which obviously compliance with study medication or study procedure is so important. And if we can improve those numbers, we will improve the efficacy that you would see potentially in that study, given the compliance.
Are there things that you put in place as far as alerts and encouragement on that compliance and adherence?
100%. So we think about it a number of ways. We think about an intelligent alert. So for example, let's say, Ben, you're in a study, you wake up in the morning, at 7:05, you get an alert to take your medication that morning. You go ahead and do it. And then you have an afternoon time to take it, and you take it before the alert occurs. You don't need that extra alert now because you've already been compliant with your medication. But you get that alert in the morning. The medication ideally should be taken by 10. In your local time zone, it would be great to get that second alert tailored specifically to you as a patient. So for us, things like that are very, very important. If you're supposed to have a number of events per day, it's likely you should have counted up to 10 events, and by 3 o'clock, you're only at 3. We want to talk to that patient directly with an alert to be able to say, have you not recorded them? How's your day going, and so forth. But we want those events to be recorded in the time in which they're taking place. But another patient that's already recorded 9, we don't need to harass them to put in further data. So making them as smart as possible to help a patient along, and doing them in a way where they're probably more proactive at the beginning, and as the patient gets better at doing their data entry, slowing down those alerts because they're obviously in a good trend.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we've only got a couple minutes left, so I think I'll go back to your friend's comment about in a year like this, you have to find the good things that you can. What do you think are the good things that might stick with regard to, conducting clinical trials, changes in the way trial information is collected? What do you think are the most important ones that might stick going forward?
For someone who's run clinical studies for literally, as we said, just about 20 years, the part for me that's always been a frustration is how long it takes a study to get up and running. And I say that because we see so many novel therapies where, because of this issue and that issue, we lose months getting the studies operational. I would really hope that the pandemic will cause us to look at study startup times as a whole and see where can we make that faster. Because we at Axiom, we focus on small to medium organizations. They are very often reactive to time. And generally they move as fast as they can. But there are a lot of bottlenecks in the process in institutions, which of course have just become more complex because of paperwork and supply chain aspects. And there are just ways that if we could speed up the process and shave 3 months, 4 months, 5 months in the process, it means that those therapies will come to market that much faster. And of course, that means helping patients sooner. So I would love to see that become a critical aspect. And the second one I would add is that we have a theme at Axiom about sort of owning your data relationship. And the idea is you should have access to critical information at all times to make the best decisions. We believe that if we take this opportunity to think differently about organizing information that we have at our disposal, I think we can run better studies. We think we can run them faster. We can enable the right people to make better decisions. And again, hopefully speed trials. So just changing our mindset somewhat, we think would make an enormous difference. And
do you think the agencies have changed their behavior at all and in their receptivity to some of these changes?
No doubt. We were seeing approval activities to many studies that we had that were being submitted. 30 days was down to a week. In studies that were, non-COVID related, still significantly faster responses. I would like to see, as we move into a new presidential administration in the US, of course, see if agencies think about hiring further resources, expand the capability in terms of time, to your point, from an FDA standpoint, and just continue to be part of that process of moving trials along quicker as they have been during the pandemic.
Terrific. Well, Andrew, I think we've come close to the end of our time here. Any final kind of parting thoughts on how clinical trials are changing and what we should expect coming in the future?
Absolutely. I think for us, that there's just so much that more we can do with technology if we put our heads into it. I think we can continue to improve how trials get thought of, how we execute them, where can we cut out steps that don't add any value, and focus in 2021 about speeding research in so many different ways. So I'm excited, as many are, to say goodbye to 2020 for obvious reasons, and look towards a 2021 where we enhance studies and deliver even better patient care in terms of getting results out faster and products to market.
Andrew, thanks again. This has been really helpful to understand, to gather your perspectives and understand some of the things that you're seeing. I, for one, want to thank the organizers of the Biotech Showcase. And again, thank you for the time that you took for this conversation.
Ben, greatly appreciated. Also want to thank the team from Biotech Showcase for this opportunity to spend some time with you today. Wishing everybody a fantastic January.